not allowed to open up again on Monday. What are business owners there telling you about that?
They're very frustrated. I think there was an expectation, Allison, that coming here out into this next phase, that Miami Beach would at least be considered, that Miami-Dade County would at least be considered. We do know that in terms of just the total number of cases we're not keeping the beaches open during spring break, that the general sentiment right now among business owners is that he's being extra cautious, both in terms of just opening up restaurants for 25% capacity when states like Georgia are doing 50, for example, and also not opening up certain areas that are vital economic cogs for Florida.
Sam, I know you've been speaking with hotel owners, business owners there, who are, I know, want to keep their employees safe and keep folks safe, but are also struggling with how difficult it is to have to let people go or furlough them. What kind of conversations have you been having with them about those struggles?
It's immensely difficult. I spoke with an owner of a hotel who owns, manages 12 to 13 hotels in Miami, Los Angeles, New York. They have 1,900 employees who have been furloughed at this point. He said the hardest thing that you can do at this stage of the crisis is to tell someone who has been providing heartfelt service to guests that looks after fellow employees that I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go home, and I can't give you a finite date as to when we're going to be able to get you back online here. And we know, Allison, the unemployment claim numbers are out, and Florida was at the top of the heap, unfortunately, hundreds of thousands of unemployment claims that came out today. So at a time when 30-some-odd million Americans are filing unemployment claims, these restaurant and hotel and business owners want to do anything they can to get their employees back and working again. But this is outside of their control. This comes down to government policy and obviously data points. When our leaders think it's going to be safe to open up certain sectors of the economy, they feel helpless while it's all going on. But they all tell me almost with unanimity that the hardest part about all this is telling their employees that they can't come to work and they're not going to get paid.
That has been the most difficult part of this journey, is having, as someone who has done nothing wrong, who is an incredible employee, who gives service from the heart, takes care of his guests and his fellow team members, and for us to ask them, hey, you have to take some time off until further notice. And that's very difficult.
So that right there was the president of SH Hotels and Resorts talking about what the personal impact, Allison, has been. He's hoping that this is going to be a process in terms of letting guests back in, even if there's not a ton of demand, that they can ensure safety and get people back in their hotels within weeks. But I will tell you, local leaders right now have suggested that when it comes to the beaches, which we talk about a lot in Florida, and hotels in Miami Beach, we're probably looking at June. I mean, you're looking at another month plus of this in all likelihood.
All right, Sam Brock, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on the situation there in Florida. We'll be talking to you soon. I know that for sure.
Thanks, Allison.
Some states are opening businesses and trying to restart their economies, but can they do that while other states are still closed? MSNBC anchor Katie Tur shows us the ripple effect one New York City restaurant is having on the broader economy.
There are tens of thousands of coronavirus-shuttered restaurants in New York City. And this is one of them.
If you've ever been in a closed restaurant, there's a certain smell.
The Smile is a popular downstairs cafe in Lower Manhattan. Matt Kliegman is co-owner.
Actually, the Sunday of the 8th, I think, we had probably the best Sunday we've ever had in the history of the restaurant. Monday, down 10 to 15%. Tuesday, down 10 to 15%. Wednesday, 25%. At this point, we were like, something's happening. We closed Sunday night. So we went from maybe our best Sunday night we've ever had to, without question, the worst Sunday night we've ever had.
In 7 days.
Yeah.
When the Smile closed, it joined in a wave of local disasters that are also part of a cascading national crisis. Just as COVID-19 infections spread exponentially, so does COVID-induced economic pain, as we found out tracing the path of the Smile's losses back up through its supply chain. Normally, the cafe buys from about 24 vendors, including meat, fish, bread, and more, each with its own web of suppliers. We followed the Smile's produce line, 10 miles north to Hunts Point in the Bronx. home to Baldor Fine Foods and several other major produce distributors. When the Smile and the rest of New York's food scene shut down, business at Baldor was suddenly at risk of shutting down too.
So you lost 85% of your business?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
A lot, yeah. The information was coming in so fast and changing so rapidly, we almost didn't have time to think.
Baldor has recovered a lot of those losses with a pivot to home deliveries, but not enough to avoid cutbacks. And a shift in Baldor's business means a shift for its suppliers as well. Hundreds of local farms across the country, including Clover Farms in Pennsylvania, Little Bear Farms in Texas, Bernard Ranch in California, and Rice Lake Farms in Grant, Michigan, where we found Rick Seibel. His 600-acre farm grows the onions, carrots, and beets typically destined for the Smile and dozens of other New York City restaurants.
Normally, like this time of year, I'm shipping 2 and 3 trucks midweek to New York, and now I'm only shipping 1 today.
Rick has reduced worker hours and has also postponed spending more than $250,000 on maintenance and equipment, money that is now not going back into the local or national economy.
There are some estimates that as many as 40% of New York City restaurants won't reopen. What would that mean for you?
There might be a lot less of us around doing what we do. Heaven forbid, but that could happen, just like restaurants. As many as 40%, you're saying, I believe that could happen.
Back at the Smile, all Matt can do is wait.
Are you bracing yourself for this business going under?
I've accepted that if we don't get the support from the government or our insurance companies refuse to actually pay the business interruption insurance that they should, if we don't get either of that, it's possible we may never reopen.
Allison,
And Katie joins me live now from Grand Central Station.
I'm sorry,
Hey there,
Allison,
Katie.
I jumped the gun there a little bit.
No,
my
go.
apologies. It's worth lingering on that for a moment because that was one restaurant and just one supply chain, and we could have taken that supply chain even farther than we did. They have 12 or a dozen other suppliers, and they all have a web of supply chains that have been interrupted as well. There are tens of thousands of restaurants in this city alone, all with that same thing happening. So when you consider how the economy works and you look at a place like Georgia and Governor Kemp that is reopening Georgia, that's great for Georgia, but not that great for Georgia because Georgia can't be at 100% if New York is not also at 100%. We're so divided politically. We talk about this all the time. But economically, Allison, we are very connected.
It is incredible how interconnected we are. And Katie, I'm so sorry to have cut you off there at the beginning. I know you are at a Grand Central Station that looks very, very different from what Grand Central Station is normally like. You talked with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. He made a big announcement about New York City subways today. What did he tell you?
You never have to apologize to me, number one. And number two, here's what Governor Cuomo said. He's going to be shutting down the New York City subway service between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. every day. That is a very big deal because New York City subways have always run for 24 hours a day. And he's doing that because we've all seen these videos now. There is a real problem with people and the homeless sheltering in the subways and creating a potentially dangerous situation in terms of public health. When the health workers and other essential workers had to get on the trains in the morning, they were worried about spreading the disease even further. So he's going to shut it down. Each train is going to be completely sanitized every single night. The homeless population is going to be forced to the street, where the mayor of New York City hopes they can get more direct help from people who are looking to help the homeless shelter in safer areas. And the essential workers and all the people that still need to take the trains every day can wake up in the morning, get on the train, and be confident that they are in a clean subway car, that they are not going to get something in that subway car and then potentially transfer it to other people around the city.
Katie, it is just a heartbreaking situation. We know how the homeless population in New York is struggling. We know how hard hit the essential workers and the MTA workers have been. It's just incredible. Thank you so much. We've been so thrilled to have you on the show 2 days in a row, just giving us a better picture of what's going on in New York City.
3 days in a row, Allison. Thank you.
Fewer cars on the road, fewer planes in the air, the demand for oil screeching to a halt. And in places like central Oklahoma, that means oil rigs are shutting down and oil storage tanks are overflowing. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky is with me now from Cushing, Oklahoma. And Morgan, for people who don't know Cushing, tell us what's going on there and why oil is such a crucial part of that community.
Hey, Allison, let me just adjust the mask here. But yes, we are in Drumright, Oklahoma right now. And as you can see behind me, you can see just how vital this industry is to this area. And you mentioned Cushing. We're about 30 miles outside of Cushing, and that is where you have one of the nation's largest oil storage areas. It can hold upwards of 90 million gallons of oil. And the real concern right now, considering this oil crash, is that with no demand and supply only rising, that facility is going to run out of space to store all of this oil. And when that happens, you have major oil producers left looking elsewhere. It's really an unprecedented situation that this industry now finds itself in. And we're already starting to see some significant fallout here in the form of layoffs, in the form of drastic cutbacks from oil producers. This one of the few wells that's still operating right now, because we know we're already seeing upwards of 40% of working oil wells be taken offline simply to try to halt that massive amount of oil that's being forced back into the market. Allison?
Morgan, how are the excess oil supplies, the rock bottom oil prices, how are they affecting the rest of the economy there? Because we know it's this sort of ripple out domino effect.
Yeah, it's absolutely a ripple effect. And it's important to note that a lot of people hear about the oil industry and either they think of the big executives in those high rises in Houston and Dallas and other cities that are making the business decisions. But that ripple effect impacts not just the oil businesses, but the welders, the restaurateurs who feed the oil workers, the convenience stores where these delivery trucks fuel up and get, snacks for the road. This impacts so many different industries simply because there's so many workers that are a part of it. And that's why when you have an industry report that says you have 1 million workers in the oil industry that could be laid off over the next year, it's incredibly alarming simply because you see how big a footprint it has, not just here in Oklahoma, but in Texas and the Dakotas and elsewhere. And those reverberations are only starting to be felt.
This situation is a bloodbath to the economy of this community. Okay, to have both of these situations, the virus and the oil business, hit us all at one time is it's the only way I can describe it as a bloodbath. This little community of 8,000 is dependent on the oil business. It's the lifeblood. I mean, there are numerous offshoots of the oil business, supply businesses, tank businesses, on and on and on that supply the economy with life. And without the oil business being healthy, then the entire economy in this community is flat.
So, yeah, a lot of concern, Allison. That oil price anywhere from $10 to $20 a barrel right now. A lot of these companies aren't going to be profitable until that number gets closer to 30. And even industry experts have no idea to look into a crystal ball and say when that's going to happen. So the pain in this industry, just really no way to know how long it's going to last. And that is why it is so concerning, especially in communities like this, when literally everyone here has ties to what you see behind me. The very thing that's been fueling this state, this community since its inception is now the reason it's hurting so bad. Allison?
Morgan, we know Oklahoma has more than 3,400 COVID-19 cases to date. You've been talking about how the area's economy is struggling because of the oil business. How are they doing managing coronavirus cases there?
Well, they pride themselves on being one of the lowest cases per capita in the country, Allison, but there's still a very concerning number, and that is the number of rural communities that are scattered across this state and the dwindling number of resources for them from a medical standpoint. And so that's why the director of the state health department told me that they've deployed more than 50 basically telemedicine units to these areas where someone who's sick can come up and they can interface with a doctor who's in a Tulsa, who's in an Oklahoma City. And that's bringing a little bit of peace of mind on that front. In the meantime, the state really planning on reopening in a big way tomorrow, following states such as Georgia and Texas. We know that restaurants, movie theaters, barbershops, they're going to be able to open. There will be stipulations with that soft opening, but a lot of people ready to get back to life as normal here, yet doing so as safely as possible because the presence of the virus is still very much a reality here in Oklahoma. Allison?
Morgan Chesky in Oklahoma, thank you so very much. NBC News caught up with a few COVID-19 survivors. Here are their stories.
I want people to realize that there is hope, that there's the sun still shining, and we're going to come out of this. And I believe that nations all over the world, we're going to be stronger because of it. They called my family and said I had less than a 50% chance of coming off. My vitals were dropping. The ventilator settings were turned up. My body, the fever was spiking again. They couldn't explain it. They were looking for a second infection. And really, I had about a 30% chance to live if you look at the statistics. But miraculously, sometime between Friday night and Saturday morning, I truly believe that God healed me. I'm a man of faith. So faith is what I hold on to. The doctors and the nurses, they couldn't explain it Saturday. Of course, they were happy. They said, "You're a miracle." I had nurses who would literally just walk into my ICU room. They'd have to put all their gear on, which takes quite a while. And they would just come in just to look at me, which normally is pretty creepy. But they did it because they just wanted to see a miracle.
My wife received the plasma treatment. She received it on the Friday before Easter. I also had the virus also. I'm the one that contracted it first. I spent 6 days in the hospital. I got out at 2 o'clock that afternoon. She came into the hospital at 10 a.m. It was intubated right away. It doesn't matter what it costs to me. I told them I'll sell my house. I'll sell everything I own to save my wife. Right now, she has, we're going on day 26.
I'm amazed actually, Lewis, that you're talking to us. What love you must have for your wife to be able to raise that awareness for, awe, absolute awe. And I will add her to our church's prayer list. One of the healthcare assistants who cannulated me and took my blood, a gentleman called Barry, I'll remember him forever. He was just so wonderful. I kept saying, "Don't come near me, let me cough, let me turn away, don't breathe the same air." I was so panicked about infecting others. And he just looked at me in the eye and he said, "Don't worry, I've got nobody else at home. It's just me." And I was like, what a selfless act of kindness that this man was. He was taking all of the suspect coronavirus, all of those suspected COVID-19 cases to protect his colleagues.
It really makes you not take anything for granted anymore. Even the small things. Every moment I get with my husband, I cherish it.
We're beginning to realize the value of life. Certainly there are some that are protesting, that are minimizing this virus, but to those of us who survived this, I think there's a chain there that cannot be broken because we've all had to go through this, and I think it's truly going to strengthen a lot of people.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Expect to see more cases across the United States.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, covering coronavirus with facts over fear.
Let's talk about ventilators. What should we be conscious of? Walk me through what the symptoms look like.
At a time of crisis, turn to the most trusted TV news anchor in America.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Expect to see more cases across the United States.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
This country was forged in part by shared sacrifice, and once again, we're called to step up. We hope you'll continue to stay informed and stay engaged as we follow this journey together. I'm Lester Holt, and for all my colleagues at NBC News, take care.
If it's asking the tough questions.
Would you prefer a 14-day national shutdown?
If it's asking for accountability.
Respirators and ventilators. Has the federal government stepped up enough?
If it's navigating the new normal in America. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
The coronavirus outbreak. What's next? NBC News has in-depth coverage, answers to your questions, insight from medical experts, and up-to-the-minute live blog updates. For continuing coverage, turn to the networks and platforms of NBC News.
The federal social distancing guidelines expire today, but is it safe for states to start reopening? Here's what Dr. Fauci said on the Today Show this morning.
When you pull back, there will be cases. And what we need to do is make sure they have in place the capability of identifying, isolating, and contact tracing individuals. If they do that,
do the states that
I feel cautiously optimistic.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins me now. And Dr. Azar, some health experts are warning that lifting social distancing guidelines too soon will lead to a second wave of coronavirus. Are we ready to reopen even in some places?
So, Allison, look, I mean, even Dr. Fauci just said that when you pull back, you will see more cases. That's just honestly what is going to happen logically. I think people need to remember the federal guidelines for reopening really require that 14-day gating period where states can demonstrate that there are a decreased number of cases before they enter into phase one and before they go into Also important to remember, and Governor Cuomo had this in his presser last Sunday, he said there's really three dials that you're looking at. There's the number of hospitalizations, there's the number of diagnostic tests, and there's the number of positive antibody tests. And depending on how those three dials are moving are all going to factor into whether or not a state is ready to open. And furthermore, it's not just the state homogeneously. I think every governor recognizes that different counties and different areas, the regionality or the regional variance, I should say, will definitely play a role in this. So, for example, upstate New York regions there might be able to open up, sooner than the metro area in downstate New York.
Can I ask you a question about what it means for an area not to be hard hit, Dr. Azar? For example, some states just haven't experienced as many cases of coronavirus as other states. Does that mean that they or parts of their state are ready to reopen, or does that mean that the virus hasn't gotten there yet?
So that's a great question, Allison. And truly, the most honest answer is that without the ideal amount of what's called serosurveillance, being able to either do diagnostic testing on the entire population or doing serologic or antibody tests that are validated and trying to get a true background number, absent that, there's always been the expectation